Everyone wants a low-cost greenhouse for year-round fresh food in their backyard. But what if you build the wrong one? In this video, I'm going to show you how I built a greenhouse, low cost, that will cost you under $10 a square foot, including heating and cooling systems that work year-round. And the best part is, it's totally scalable to almost any size you want or need. I'm going to show a few examples of cheap greenhouses, as well as my own personal low-cost greenhouse that I made for very little money that lets me have a winter garden in my greenhouse in extreme Canadian winters. Simple Tech, that's the name of this channel, and we have piles of other videos on growing and greenhouse technology you can check out after watching this video just by hitting that free subscribe button. Now, if all you want is just to cover your plants, this can get extremely cheap. What this video is talking about is how to build a low-cost winter greenhouse capable of growing plants in minus 40-degree weather, so you can have a winter garden as well as a spring garden, a fall garden, and a summer garden. That's the key, growing year-round with no breaks, so you always have fresh, healthy food no matter what time of year it is. And money matters, so it has to be an affordable greenhouse. If you're building a greenhouse, you got to have a frame. Okay, it's possible to make a greenhouse without a frame, maybe just a plastic sheet on the ground, or something inflatable like a balloon, but is that really a functional greenhouse and four-season? We need something with a door that you can easily access a few times a day. What I did was build a metal conduit frame greenhouse for under $200 in materials, and I framed in a regular residential door. Easy access several times a day, and I got the door cheap. Free, actually. I just had to buy 20 bucks in lumber to frame it in. I cut and squished the ends of the metal conduit to make a 2V geodesic dome, and using a website called domarama.com, I was able to measure and bolt the pieces together, so I didn't have to buy any hubs to construct the dome. The connections had to be taped over though, as the ends were a bit sharp, and that won't work well with a double inflated poly covering. So let's say I'm in for about 200 bucks so far on a 200 square foot geodesic dome greenhouse frame. Now, domes are great, but you can do the same thing with a hoop house, and you can make that hoop house as long as you want, making it scalable to almost any size you want or need. The most important part of a greenhouse is the covering material. There's lots of great materials to choose from. And even I made a video discussing the pros and cons of several different types of covering materials. Now, let's assume we can't get our covering material for free. That means the most affordable material to buy is poly. And when going 4 seasons through a Canadian winter, one layer just isn't enough. The easiest way to get a double layer of poly is with an air inflation fan. That's what I did. So you can buy an air inflation fan, or you can tear apart an old inflatable Santa yard decoration and cannibalize the fan. It works amazing on my greenhouse and has been running for months now. Zero cost plus some duct tape to secure it in place. I bought my poly covering from China using the Alibaba website. It's about 300 bucks for 2 layers of 6mm poly with UV coating. Having double air inflated walls is great, and they offer about an R2 for insulation purposes, but if you plan to go through a real Canadian winter, you need more than just the walls insulated. Adding insulation in the floor will hugely increase the insulation value of your greenhouse. I added 3 to 4 inches of hardboard styrofoam to my floor, and it made a huge difference in heating the greenhouse. I bought the styrofoam from a commercial building demolition site. $5 a sheet, 10 sheets for 50 bucks. Buying this new would be massively cost prohibitive, costing over $60 a sheet for anything comparable. Another option I plan to use on future greenhouses is aircrete. Aircrete can be made and poured to form a solid insulated subfloor and will cost about the same as my used styrofoam sheets to make. Now, my dome doesn't have insulated walls other than air inflation, but a hoop house design could easily add insulation sheets to the north wall, further increasing the insulation value and letting you generate much less heat for the same result inside. Basically, you make what's called a solar greenhouse. Where I live, cooling isn't a huge problem. I say huge problem because we rarely get over 90 degrees Fahrenheit here. Now, if you're in a location like I am, the only cooling you really need to concern yourself with is vents and fans. My dome has several vents, which I have fans installed on so I can push a lot more air through and cool the greenhouse fast, even in the hottest days. Now, if you live in a climate where you get over 90 degrees often, vents and fans just aren't going to be enough. You're going to need an evaporative cooler or some kind of geothermal ground temperature cooling system. The evaporative cooler works best in dry environments. Actually, in low humidity climates, an evaporative cooler is your best cost-conscious option for a greenhouse. But if you're in a high humidity environment, some sort of geothermal low-grade heat exchanger like Sergi's offers might be a better option to cool your greenhouse. Venting didn't cost me much. I had the materials and all the fans cost me under $100 from Canadian Tire. I open the door on days when it just gets too hot too, with the side benefit of letting some pollinators in. Heating a greenhouse in northern climates can be the most expensive operating expense. Now, some people use climate batteries, and there are heating systems using solar and large heat batteries, as well as compost batteries, geothermal, etc. I made a video on 9 different heating systems you can find and watch on my channel discussing different greenhouse heating systems in detail. But for my greenhouse, I already had an outside wood boiler, so I just ran a line from my boiler to my greenhouse. Instant radiator heat. The BTU output possibilities from a boiler is phenomenal. Cost was about $800 for the lines. Connectors, pump, and radiator. Expensive, yes, but I now have huge amounts of heat pumping into my greenhouse in the coldest weather with no risk of fire inside. If you need to heat your greenhouse, chances are you live in a northern climate and have to deal with reduced sunlight in the winter months as well. Reduced sunlight means less growing time, and the only way to make up for that is to add artificial light. Okay, there's the trick of making the north wall in your greenhouse as light reflective as possible, which amplifies the amount of usable light, but that doesn't increase the amount of growing time with light. Grow lights are the only answer, and the new LED grow lights are a fantastic option without having to use massive amounts of electricity. Compared to the old halogen style type lights, LED grow lights use upwards of 10 times less electricity to run. That means less infrastructure for power lines for the lights, and the real overhead cost is the infrastructure because someone has to pay for that bill. For my greenhouse, I'm using the Mars Hydro 300 watt LED light, and 4 of them is enough to light up my whole greenhouse. 300 watts times 4 is 1200 watts. Small enough that I can run that from a good extension cord on a timer. Minimal overhead expenses for infrastructure. The lights cost about $400 each, so that's only $1,200. Plants gotta have water. And while hauling water into a greenhouse isn't that bad in the summer, hauling water in minus 40 degrees is not fun at all. I ran an underground heated water line into my greenhouse, so all I have to do is turn on a tap to get water inside my greenhouse in the winter, and it works in the summer too. Now, I could water my plants 3 to 4 times a day, but I'm lazy. I decided I'd use a simple technology idea called wicking pots. There's a video on this channel on how to make wicking pots, so I only have to water my plants every few days. I feel it's better to water plants from the roots up too, something wicking pots are great at doing. The underground water line cost me well under $100, as I installed it when I installed the heating lines. The wicking pots cost me nothing but time, as I got all the materials for free. Okay, so let's add this up. We start off with about $200 for the greenhouse frame. Then I spent about $300 on the covering, about $50 on the insulation, that's the hardboard insulation on the ground, about $100 on the cooling system, which is basically vents and fans. I dropped $800 on the heating system, and $1,200 on the lighting system, as well as I spent about another $100 on the watering system, giving us a grand total of $2,750. Now, if you take out the heating and the lighting systems, it leaves you with about $750. But the heating and lighting systems allow me to have a high-end greenhouse that can grow 4 seasons with heat and light.